Economically, I think we all know that we're in a freight recession or normalization for sure. Optimistically, I think we found the bottom, and that I feel like it's not the numbers we want it to be, but I feel like we've stabilized.
Yeah.
I feel like we're starting to inch forward, and I'll say inch.
Welcome to the State of the Industry podcast with John Elliott, a third-generation transportation professional, immediate past chairman of the Truckload Carriers Association, vice president of the American Trucking Associations, and founder and CEO of LoadOne. And me, your host, Brandon Baxter. We've spent more than 2 decades in the industry. We've experienced driver shortages, truck shortages, recessions, financial constraints, technological advancements, and legislation. Yeah, we've seen it all. This is trucking news for the drivers and professionals on the ground. This is opinion and insight from the inside. This is the State of the Industry podcast. Welcome to the State of the Industry podcast with John Elliott. I'm your host, Brandon Baxter. This is a monthly series dedicated to discussions pertaining to the trucking industry and featuring commentary by the CEO of LoadOne and immediate past chairman of TCA, John Elliott. John, thanks again for joining me.
Hey, good morning, Brandon. Good to be here as always.
Yes, it is. It's better to be here than there, I think some people say, and I still haven't figured out what exactly that means, but it's good to be here. That's we had a little a pre-discussion as we were getting ready to record today, and John, before we get started, we were talking about the past Memorial Day holiday. For those who were just watching or listening, we just recently, recognized Memorial Day, and in which we remember and pay respects to the men and women who've, they've made the ultimate sacrifice in defending our country. So, John, without getting too deep in the weeds, I'm just curious, what does Memorial Day signify to you personally?
I had the great privilege to serve in the U.S. Armed Forces. I was in the Army, and I think those holidays like Memorial Day especially hit harder. And that, I mean, God bless, I was never shot at. I never fired in combat. So, you consider yourself lucky. You train for the things and the situations you hope you never need to go through or to experience. And when you look at, literally some gave all, it means a lot. I mean, I know, as a company, one of the charities we support quite heavily is Reach Across America. Right. And I've been in Arlington, for many years, watching the wreaths be placed and helping to place wreaths on graves of the fallen. And it really hits home when you see a grave of one of the newly fallen and to see a wife there, like laying on the ground after placing the wreath, with children crying and hugging the headstone. And you realize that so many of us, and I'm as guilty and as 99% of our population, that we don't really appreciate the sacrifice that the few have given for everything that we all have. So, it really gets lost in barbecues and cookouts and beach time, the real meaning of the holiday for sure. So it does hit home, and I hope it continues to hit home, and hope in a way it hits home harder for more people over time, that they just take that extra second to realize. And as a country, we owe them a debt of thanks that we can never repay.
You make a great point. I mean, echoing what you said, I'm just as guilty as anybody else. Now, I've said it in this way before, that, I know myself personally, I'm not the type of person that I'm not built to be that type of individual to whether it's armed forces or protective services, EMS, police, fire, whatever it might be. I'm not built that way to handle those types of situations. And I know that about myself, but I'm very, very grateful for those who do, because they're stepping in areas where I know, personally, I'm not built for. So I'm thankful. And like you said, a lot of times we take it for granted and sometimes forget those things. And so Memorial Day is a great opportunity. And I shouldn't say, great in the sense that it's, phenomenal, but it's a way for us to, in most cases, solemnly remember the freedoms that we're, allotted in this country because of those people who have made those sacrifices.
For sure. I mean, I'm lucky. I guess I was built for it or that, and I was able to take 11, 12 years of U.S. Army infantry and honestly, I was an infantry drill sergeant. Believe it or not, of all things. So,
oh wow,
that's I was able to take that job skill and parlay that into a career in expedited trucking.
That's
one of the few places that you can feel like it's a battle every day.
That is true. That's a great point. You make another excellent point. And John, I did not realize that about you. So thank you for your service. It's appreciated what you've done.
I correct a lot of people. That's Veterans Day. That's the day you do that, because a lot of people thank you for your service on Memorial Day, and it's right. It's not about being a veteran on that day. Right. That is for an elite, special group of individuals who, like you said, went above and beyond and really gave everything.
That's a great way to put it. Thank you. Thank you for that. Gives us all a moment to pause. We may have listeners or someone viewing that isn't taking in this episode until sometime in next, December. But, the fact remains that, being appreciative and remembering those who are no longer with us because of the sacrifices they made. So.
Even if they're watching this in December, then hopefully they think about Wreath Laying Day and look up across America and what that charity does and the huge role that the trucking industry plays with that charity hand in hand to help make that possible. So again, it's just one of those many things, so many things that the trucking industry does that's not often recognized by the general public, and sometimes even by our own industry. We don't do enough as an industry to promote the good that we do, even internally sometimes. So we're all guilty of that in this industry. I mean, we do great things, and sometimes we need to sound our own horn or trumpet our own story.
Sure. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think that more of that would help the industry, help its image altogether. And we've talked about it before on this podcast, talked about, better marketing towards, the type of drivers that we want to enter into the industry at this point. So I agree. I think that goes a long way. And it's also great to remember where we came from, in terms of our background, whether it's in trucking or military or whatever it might be, to have that, memorialized in a way, whether it's on a personal level or a professional level as well.
Yeah, I will segue a little bit when you talk about where we came from, and that I did get the sad news just yesterday. Many in the industry will remember PTL or Premium Transportation, out of Toledo. One of the founders was Dave Schwartz, who I considered a good friend over the years. And don't have details. We got the sad news that Dave passed away yesterday unexpectedly. Leaves behind family and children and things like that. So, it's sad. You realize how short life is, or how short life can be.
Sure.
And, you got to make the most of every day. And Dave was really, I won't say a pioneer, but he was definitely an earlier on guy.
Integral part of Expedite.
Yeah, definitely part of it. I mean, him and John Mueller and Chris, were regular attendees of the expo and that. Chris unfortunately passed away years ago to cancer and that. I mean, so again, far too young. But they played a role in helping to shape this industry and what it is today. That company was later acquired by Magnet Worldwide and became part of Bolt later.
That's right. Well, our sympathies go out to the family and friends, and John, my sympathies to you as well. Losing a friend like that.
No one ever wants to get those texts or calls.
No, you're absolutely right. Sticking with, and I know it's not always an easy segue to make.
Let's talk positivity now.
Sure. It's a segue. Let's
talk about the economy. No.
We're the what?
Okay.
Yeah. So speaking of the economy, John, obviously the name of our podcast here is The State of the Industry, and it lately doesn't seem like there's a whole lot going on in the trucking world. But is there anything that we can talk about that might be pertinent to anyone who's watching or listening? Something of importance.
Economically, I think we all know that we're in a freight recession or normalization for sure. Optimistically, I think we found the bottom. and that I feel like it's not the numbers we want it to be, but I feel like we've stabilized.
Yeah.
I feel like we're starting to inch forward, and I'll say inch, and I think it's going to be a slow crawl out of this. Hopefully it looks like we have a deal to get the debt ceiling raised. I think that could have made a very big effect on the economy and freight. This week that's getting voted on by Congress. So stay tuned. Hopefully that happens the way we think it will. And that, and I think at the end of the day, nobody wants to hold the economy hostage. Everybody wants to make the best deal they can make and what they feel is best for the country. I think that'll give some more stability. That'll give some stability to the stock market and to the banks, and then in turn businesses. And hopefully then those things stabilize up. We can see a little bit of interest rate reduction, later this year, and I think that would help to stimulate the economy back. So I'm still relatively optimistic that the third quarter is going to be better and the fourth quarter will be better yet. I don't know; it's not going to be like 2022 robust, but I think it's going to be good or decent again. Used truck prices have taken dramatic falls. I just read an article this morning on that. Again, it's supply and demand. I think you have a lot of small carriers or fleets that have exited the market. Unfortunately, you have to find balance between supply and demand, and that's going to happen. And sometimes it's people choose to retire a little earlier, choose to sell, and some just don't have a choice and are forced to exit. But again, Darwinism, the strong survive, and ideally those that are left will do better in the long run. And it's like I tell our fleet all the time, you have to play the long game, and it's a good example of it. Another example of the long game is really legislation. There are some good bills advancing slowly through Congress. I
noticed the truck parking bill is advancing now. I just noticed that as well.
Yes, we fought very hard, TCA and APA, for that. I would love to have got that done under my term last year, but man, you realize those things tend to take years. You were one of the ones that really got that ball rolling, though. I know you've always been a big proponent for that. I was part of a great team that really recognized how critical parking was to our industry in so many ways. You look at trying to get drivers and young drivers. Well, we got to retain drivers, and what's one of the biggest factors of retaining drivers is parking and job satisfaction, and for female drivers, the safety aspect. So again, I think there are good things happening. Unfortunately, we tend to overfocus on the bigger negative ones, but when they're economic, that affects everybody's pocket. So they tend to bubble to the top for sure, and rightfully so.
Absolutely. And kind of going back to something that you mentioned a moment ago with the used truck rates going down, do you feel like that might help stimulate, the opportunity to get more trucks back into the market? I know that for a while, and granted, that was more along the lines of the new trucks with the computer chips and everything that was on hold. Does that play at all, or are those two separate issues?
Yeah, they're really, I think, two separate issues. The used truck market coming down obviously makes it more attractive for someone to go out and buy a truck. But you also have conflicting factors. You have much higher interest rates. So even though the price came down, you're going to pay a lot more in interest. Rates and revenue are down. So even if somebody gives you a truck for free or very cheap, is it the right time to jump in? I also think it might be the opportunity for some owners and fleet owners who their trucks got aged out a little bit during. They couldn't get new ones. People were not giving up the used ones they had. They ran them longer because they couldn't replace them. So I think everyone held their equipment longer than they anticipated. So the new market's going to stay pretty strong demand there just to replace equipment. It's not expansion; it's just replacement. And I think you might start to see a little bit of a surge or wave in used replacement, that people are buying newer used equipment. A lot of individuals, especially if you're a single owner operator, it's very hard to justify the expense of a brand new sleeper straight truck nowadays. And the economics of it. Generally you're buying a new used truck that came off of a fleet owner, running teams and things like that. So as they're able to better replace equipment again, that'll move some more of that equipment into the market. but it's tough. The new stuff is still very, very expensive.
Yeah.
And if the used trucks are, down dramatically on value, well, it makes it a lot harder to trade your used truck to help offset the price of the new one. So there's a lot of dynamics that go into the whole equipment trade cycle and market. So we'll see how it plays out.
Okay.
I don't think it's so much on the expedite side as much as it's the tractors, the standard tractor world. Sleeper straight trucks. That's just a very unique market. A lot of that equipment that got held on to a lot longer than expected. It's got a lot more miles on it. It's aged more. So sometimes, these guys will keep an older truck because good or bad, it may be older, but they know it. They know the reliability of it. They know what they've done to it versus getting a 3 or 4 year newer used truck that you don't know what you're getting a lot of times. Right. So we'll see. We'll see. Like everything, it makes for interesting times.
It makes for interesting discussion points as well. And I mean, in my experience over the years in recruiting and working with companies like LoadOne, and every carrier seems to have a different what's the word I'm looking for? Not ramification necessarily, but qualification, I think it's a different Asian that I'm looking for there. But in terms of truck age, has LoadOne budged at all? Because typically most of them are looking for something that's 10 years or newer, right? I mean, unless it's in some sort of prime
I think we've all
operating.
had to look some, when you couldn't get new ones for 2 or 3 years, it kind of forced that. We've always had an age requirement like that. But we have our own maintenance shops and everything. So we'll do a pretty high level inspection on the truck. And that, because, I've seen 4 or 5 year old trucks that are garbage. I've seen 10-year-old trucks that are meticulously kept and maintained and that. So age is just
the individual.
Age is just a number. But
I tell myself that every morning.
Yeah. The thing you have to run into is you do have some customers that have age requirements. Yeah. It's really that was designed for the trailers. They will apply that to a straight truck at times. They customers, that was really designed back in the day. And I can remember early in my career, trailers were not built very well, or they were, and forklifts were much heavier. And you saw floors separate from the side. You saw trailers buckle in the middle and collapse. The idea was the unions. It was a safety issue that forklifts falling through and forklift drivers getting hurt.
Sure.
They basically generically applied that rule over to straight trucks at some companies.
So just an all-encompassing rule.
Yeah, I mean, but a box on a straight truck is sitting on top of 2 frame rails. It's not under the same stress. It's not the same issue. So that was a misapplied rule, I think.
Interesting.
I see it applied occasionally at an individual plant here or there, but in general, Expedite, that doesn't tend to be as big a situation.
Okay. Yeah. It's one of those things that I think in most cases over the years, when I've talked with different carriers and different companies, there's always a little bit of a fluctuation, but not much. It's typically that 10-year rule. But as you just pointed out, some consolations have had to be made over the last several years. So, yeah,
I think we've all had to adapt. Yeah. And that, in ideal, you want newer equipment or
sure.
Image is very important, especially when you're doing expedite or a premium product. Yeah. And a lot of the newer equipment tends to have more safety systems, more safety technology in it.
Right.
And that's always a good thing. And unfortunately, that's been slower to come to the expedite industry than the truckload world side, because, a lot of the big safety systems, like we run them on our company tractors. Then when we move those into lease purchase or they get sold and bought by owner operators, that moves that advanced technology, down to the next level much faster. You don't see giant fleets of company-owned equipment on straight trucks. So individual owner operators a lot of times will not make that choice to buy those systems because they are expensive. Yeah. 1, 2, some of the technology was not available. The M2 platform with Freightliner, which was a very the most predominant platform really for the straight truck industry. Was not equipped to handle the Detroit diesel assurance safety system. There were some other systems you could get, but you could not get the all-in-one manufactured system.
Okay.
And some of the other systems had limited abilities there because the way the wiring was set up on those trucks and that. So no, they've rolled out the new version of that truck, a remodel of the M2, and the new one has all that available. But that's just coming now.
Right.
Where I've had tractors that are in version 3 or 4 of that safety system that we've had for 10 plus. So, and again, safety is really paramount. You can, no matter how critical the freight is, if it's on the side of the road, turned over, or someone's hurt and it's something that freight becomes very irrelevant. So
of course,
it's all about, keeping our drivers safe and the motoring public around them as safe as we can. So
absolutely. Well, sticking with Expedite, since we're kind of in that space at the moment here, and as summer is really just beginning, I mean, it's a warm one here in Cleveland today. Let's jump ahead a bit. Let's talk about the midway point of the season for us here in the Expedite industry, and that's the 2023 Expedite Expo, of course, being held in Fort Wayne, Indiana this year on July 21st and 22nd. And John, you are often one of the headlining speakers for the Saturday session. This year, it's on the future of trucking. Talk a little bit for a moment about your years of addressing the industry on these types of panels.
I guess I've got a face for radio, but somehow I get drawn into a lot of these over the years. I enjoy it. I like being able to help spread the message and talk about our industry. And sometimes there's a lot of things that are misnomers or people misunderstand about the dynamics of how it works, especially on the other side. We all that struggle. Everyone, with drivers, I mean, they're sitting in a cab, they have limited exposure. A lot of times it's easy for them to derive what they think is how things work. So it's nice to be able to share, hey, to pull back the covers or the hood and say, hey, here's how it works on the other side underneath. And here's the dynamics of how those things interplay. And as much as I'm able to help teach, you learn a lot too. You meet a lot of new people every year at those things. It's always nice to see familiar faces in the audience, of people that have sat there and you said, man, you've come back and listened to me for like 8 years in a row now. So I'm not sure to be flattered or that you couldn't find anything better to do. But
everyone's looking for that new wrinkle to see what you bring to the party next time.
Yeah, what's going to drop this time? It's not going to be a rap album, but I mean, the expo is it's a great part of our industry, it's a very special niche. I mean, a lot of memories for myself and a lot of us over the years going. The ups and downs of it, the relationships you made along the way. I mean, the history of the moving around, like you said, like my first one was in the truck stop in the Detroiter in Woodhaven, Michigan, and to watch how that evolved and, moved around and how we outgrew places and got bigger, then got smaller, then, this, that, so it's definitely interesting. I know the drivers that attend it enjoy it.
They do.
The dynamics have changed. I can remember once upon a time, the parking lot used to be like the world's biggest camp out. All the big carriers had their I'll call them encampments or something.
Right.
Medieval battle was going to happen.
Everyone kind of stayed to their own little area.
Yep. But I mean, a lot of good times. It really is. It's a fun event. It's a great event to network, to learn, to look at different carriers, products. The panels. I mean, the panels came later. Those were new. Those are things that were added over time.
Right.
And the educational aspects and education tracks were added. So I think it it continues to evolve. And then a lot of shows have died off and gone. I mean, the Great American Truck Show, the Las Vegas Truck Show is gone. But the expo has really been a niche show that's really focused much more on our industry and everything. Yeah. So
it's very unique in that aspect.
Yeah. I mean, myself and, 3 or 4 of the other larger expedite carriers exhibit, let's say at Louisville, Mid-America Truck Show.
Right.
But, we're a 1% fraction in that, thing. It's so we get lost there, or expedite as an industry gets washed out or, lost there, understandably.
Right.
Look at us in the expedite industry compared to the size of the industry as a whole. So that's what's really nice about the expo.
Hey, sorry to interrupt your podcast listening. Okay, actually, I'm not sorry. I honestly wanted to interrupt for just a couple moments and talk to you about John Elliott and LoadOne. Okay, look, John and I have known each other for years. We've worked together in some capacity over that frame of time, but honestly, right now, having the opportunity to host this podcast with him has been fantastic. And what's fantastic for you, the driver, the owner-operator, is an opportunity at LoadOne. That's right. This is an ad spot for LoadOne. They're currently recruiting for owner-operators. So if you've got a straight truck, you've got a tractor, you are a team, maybe you've got a sprinter, you want to run Expedite, you want to run truckload, get in now. Get in while the getting's good here, because LoadOne's got great benefits that they offer you. Layover pay, paid moves. They've got a wonderful driver's lounge tailored specifically to the driver, and all you have to do is go to their website. It's LoadOne.com. That's load, the number one.com, or you can apply directly at Expeditors Online or go to justcdljobs.com. They've got their stuff plastered all over there. You click on the link, you fill out the application, and I promise you, driving with LoadOne is going to be the best decision that you've ever made. All right, now back to the podcast. LoadOne is hosting the Welcome Barbecue, right? I mean, you guys are you're doing it first night there at the show. You're going to be hosting.
Well, as we evolved, the barbecue moved, from the end of the show to the beginning of the show. So yeah, we have the privilege or honor this year of sponsoring that as the kickoff event, moving that to the first night before. Hopefully that repositioning is a good thing and increases attendance and participation at it. Because I think sometimes when it was at the end of the show, a lot of people were, if you had places to go or had to get home or had to get a load delivered or things like that, a lot of people had to go. So I think doing it the night before, a lot of people arrive. It's a nice way to unwind a little bit and get in the mood or in the mindset, for the show. And
Absolutely.
Again, it's good food, good networking, a little cornhole, a little this, that. It should be a good time, I think.
We all work better on full bellies.
I've been told that.
Well, and speaking of LoadOne, John, obviously, part of our monthly conversation is going to be talking about anything new that's going on with you and with LoadOne, anything that we can, share with those out there on what you're looking for or what you're looking to do.
I can't say anything dramatic as new in our since the last podcast. We continue to push technology. We got some new things we've rolled out with our customers to help enhance the customer experience. And that may not seem relevant to a lot of people watching this podcast, but keeping our customers being able to connect and automate them more and more is good for the fleet. And again, that we've been able to do that with a lot of large direct shippers. And that have technology platforms that we can automate with them and work hand in hand with their people on. And we think that's a competitive advantage. We think direct shippers are the way to go. That's the long game for it. It's helped to keep us much more stable during this time. I mean, knock on wood, our recruiting phones are still ringing pretty solid, actually even more right now. I think, there are a lot of guys or ladies out there who their carrier kept them busy when things were pretty steady out there. Rates were high, brokers and 3PLs, people had to pay whatever they had to pay to get a truck. It was great. But then those customers are often the ones that go the other way that are now the lowest paying customers because the tide is turned. They don't have to. The direct shippers kind of sit in the middle. They paid more, but not as much, but they also don't go down as much. So when you look at the long game, direct shippers are really, at LoadOne, that's our primary. Things like brokers or bid boards and that. Not that we don't do business with them and that.
No.
Some we don't. Well, actually, there's a lot we don't. A lot of the bid boards and that we walked away from over the years. Said, we're not going to. We have a securement rate of 5% or something. We're not going to bid 30 loads to do one. It doesn't make sense.
Well, that hurts you. That hurts you in the long run, and in essence, it hurts the drivers.
Yeah. Well, and that's fine because that's a race to the bottom. On rate. And then we choose not to participate, and we choose to invest in sales and sales team. I mean, we have probably I will say conservatively one of the top 3 largest sales teams in the expedite industry, possibly second largest, maybe the first. I'm not sure. A lot of our competition is out there has been cutting, and laying. It's a hard time. They've been laying people off. We have not. So far we've been able to avoid that. I look at it when things are tough. That's when you need sales. That's when you need your operations people banging
That's
the
the
phones
time
harder.
to really buckle down. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's easier said than done to sit here and say, "Hey,
Sure.
let's go spend the same or more" when revenue's dropping. But it's easy to cut and helps you as a carrier to get through the short term, but that doesn't
Right.
protect your fleet the same way. So, just by the fact of how our phones and recruiting are ringing, sometimes our fleets they're softer than they were too. But
Yeah.
you got to remind them, hey, you think this, you should talk to recruiting. Let me tell you what they're hearing from guys who want to come over from other carriers.
Yep.
So,
yep.
And again, I think this is still a short term problem, and I think within 3-4 months it's gonna look a lot different. So we're excited. We're excited about the future at LoadOne.
Good. Good. And of course, as an industry as a whole, that's something we're looking for, is that evening out period. And I'm with you, John. I think that we're going to get to that point, hopefully sooner than, rather than later. So
I would agree.
Excellent. Anything else before we wrap things up today, John? Anything else you want to touch on? Anything that's you're keeping in your back pocket?
No, just my wallet.
Leave the wallet. I was just going to say, leave the wallet.
Yeah, no, really. That's about it. Like I said, I mean, I would say we're looking for individual owner operators, primarily, and sprinters, straight trucks and tractors. We're looking for owner operators or fleet owners, OTR, Expedite, and that. Again, we're running coast to coast. We have salespeople from the West Coast to the East Coast. So, we're one of the few expedite carriers that actually has salespeople on the ground in Mexico.
That's right.
So again, we're looking to continue to grow that. I think we're going to continue to expand. I think with nearshoring and that, we're going to continue to expand our Mexico and Laredo operations, and that hopefully have some good things to talk about in the next podcast there.
Well, there you have it, folks. You're going to have to tune into the next one to see where we go from here. All right. Well, John, thank you very much once again for an excellent episode. And thank you very much for joining us for the State of the Industry podcast with John Elliott. I've been your host, Brandon Baxter. Join us again next time as John and I will continue our discussions, all topics transportation. And don't forget to check out expeditersonline.com and justcdljobs.com for access to over 150 carriers who are actively hiring. And that includes LoadOne. Until next time, this has been the State of the Industry podcast with John Elliott. For more information on LoadOne and how to apply for one of their posted job opportunities, go to LoadOne.com. That's load1.com. And as always, be sure to check out our show notes for more information regarding LoadOne, Expeditors Online, justcdljobs.com, and any other tidbits that were mentioned during our show. Until next time.